Okay, we're up to Daf Ayin Ches. We're a little bit ahead, a daf ahead, as we get to try to get to the finish line. We get two block before for the 3 day yontif. We're learning Lilu Nishmas, Matasho ben Alexander Zushameya. My Chava, my did Nefesh, Matis Bloom. We're familiar with from the Bamachaba of the Torah Ladas, who was last heard from on our daf on Daf Yud Ches and Mesech the Shabbos. And we heard him he gave us that ditty from
Yeah.
Rav David Cohn, soll sein gesund, that since it takes beer 8 days to go ahead and ferment, so a Shabbos has to get passed in the lifetime of a beer. That's the reason why by Shalom Zacha, one of the reasons for Shalom Zacha is that it's the first Shabbos in the lifetime of the child. So therefore, that's the reason we serve beer at a Shalom Zacha. So Matis gave us, and he gave me so much more. So his yard site was yesterday. His yard site was on Shabbos HaGadol. He was nifted on Shabbos Gadol 6 years ago, and we're learning the Nishmas from Matis Yahu ben Alexander Zushameya and the Neshama Shav and Aliyah. Okay,
Amen.
yesterday we had it's just so amazing. It's just so amazing how the daf goes ahead and mirrors the Inyani Diyama. So yesterday in the parsha of Tzav, we came to the Miluyim, the days of the Miluyim, exactly what they did during the Miluyim, or to inaugurate Aaron and his sons. So we saw yesterday that the Toida had four types of kamanis: matzos, rekikin, revuchin, and a chametz, chalos chametz. Right? That's what we saw yesterday. We saw that the flour was divided unevenly. Half the flour went to it was two esroinim. Half the flour went to the chametz, and the other half went to the other three. And we what about what were the different matzahs by the Miluyim, the different matzahs by Naziris? These are other places in the Torah we find that matzahs are used. So here's our Mishnah on Daf Ayin Ches. Hameluyim hayabayim kimatzah shebetoida. That the Miluyim they came like the matzah of Toida, not like the challah chametz, but only the matzah of the Toida. Right? Chalois, Rekikin, Urevuchen. Chalois, Rekikin, Urevuchen. So three out of the four, not the chametz. Naziris, the Nazir bought his carbon bought his shlamim when he completed his Naziris. Haisabash shte yadais, two of the three kamatza shall taida. Chalois Rekikin, v'ain ba revucha. They didn't have revuchen. Good. Now we said yesterday that the three had five kav each, guys, right? We had 30 kavim, 15 went to the chametz, and 15 went to the three, the chales, the rikikin, and the revuchin. The male, if you only had two, you had 10. Nimsa, sara kavim, you had only 10 kavim to go ahead, not 15. Yerushalayim. Now we're going to go ahead and put them into Esrainim, Shein Shisha Esrainim V'adayan. And it's six. It's six and a bit. Guys, if you have three and a third, three and a third, three and a third, right? It was 10. You only need two. You're not using the third, right? So therefore, it's a third less than the 10, which is 6 and 2/3. Guys, are good? A third less than it's three and a third less. So it's 6 and 2/3. And that's the lashon that's the lashon of Idayan, that the lashon of Shesha Esroinim v'Idayan. And it's 6 and 2/3. That's the amount of okay, Menani Mili, says the Gemara, Menani Mili that the Revuch was bought by Miluyim. How do you know the Revuah was bought by Miluyim? So what does it say? Again, this is the pasuk on Miluyim. It says in Perek Ches, pasuk Chavav, yesterday's parsha. Perek Ches, pasuk Chavav. Umitzala matzos asher lefnei Hashem, loka chalis matzah achas, v'chalas lechem shemen achas, v'rokik echad. So there are three taken. It says three. What are the three? Chalis matzah, that's self-understood. Chalis lechem shemen achas, that's ambiguous. For Rakik Echad, that's understood. So there were three things. There was a challah, which is the matzah, and there was a rakik, and there was something called challah shemen. The assumption is that challah shemen, guys, is the revuchin. The assumption is that challah shemen is the revuchin. That's the assumption. So I'm running merely. Omer Rav Chisda, Omer Rav Chama bar Goyed, Omer Krav, Masala matzah shel lefnei Hashem, Loka chalas matzah achas, one, chalas lechem shemen achas, two, v'rokik echad is three. Now, Bishnei mechalais, chalais, rokik, rokik shemen, chalais, chalais, rokik, rokik. Bishnei mechalais, the chalais, that chalais means the matzah. Rokik is a rokik. Shemen ma'ininu, what is the shemen? Lav revucha, must be a revucha. So therefore we see the maluyim, there were three out of the four that's used from the lachmei taida. Maskala Rav Avya, ema ansa de moshcha, maybe it was some type of cake coagulated oil. How do you know to say that it was revucha? Maybe it was, since it doesn't, you're assuming that it's revucha, maybe it's not a revucha, maybe it's coagulated oil. Elke the Darish Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda. Like Rav Nachman bar Chisda was Darish. Mishmei the Rabbi Tavla. Ze korban aroin ubanav asher yakrivu lashem biyomi mashach oso. This is the day of Aaron ubanav that the makil Hashem biyomi mashach oso. V'chimala madu lebanav. When it says over here lebanav, it's mashma. It's a limud ledoiris to his sons. So what's the limud ledoiris to his sons from the inauguration? Biyomi masha, it says biyom hamashcho. Matzda lamadn lebona biyom mashcho. What's the limud for the generations from the biyom himashcho? So now it says miruvachas tiyena. The pasuk says we know that the yom himashacho so was revuchen, guys. We know that we know that they brought the minchas chavitin. So the Kohen bought the Minchas Chavitin one time in his life. The Kohen Gadol bought it initially, and then he bought it for the rest of his life. And we know it's Revuchin, because it says, Meruveches Tiyena. So that's a given, guys. That the korban that was brought for the Kohen Gadol and the Kohanim on the day that it was Mashach was Meruveches Tiyena was Revuchin. Again, that's what we need. Again, we need to prove by the Revuchin, by the Maluyim. So, Himasha Elamakish, we go ahead and make a Hekish. Chinuchai, we make a hekesh to the chinuch, to the hamshacha. Ma hamshichai revucha, as it says in Muvechas Tiyena, av chinuchai, so to the chinuch, when we began using the chinuch, chinuch is the first time, we began using the mishkan revucha. So that's the limbo. We're learning it about from the fact, it says Yomi Moshach, right? Yomi Moshach, what's the Moshach L'Doiris? You're teaching me that just like the Meshicha, the Chavitin, is done what? Is done for a Revucha, so too, the day of the Chinuch of that was a Revucha. So now we have all three. It says Rekik open, it says Chala open, and when it says Shemen Achas, Shemen means Revucha, that's how we know all three were used by the Miloyim. Good. Omer Rav Chisda, Kohen Gadol, Hamiskarav Lavoida, he's starting to work. Tzorach Shtei Esroino Seifa, he needs two. Achas Nahim Mashchai, the Achas Lechinuchai. He never worked before. And so what are we doing? We're giving him the chinuch of the Kohen Gadol, meaning the first time as Kohen Gadol, and also the beginning of him doing it all the time, the Minchas Chavitin. So he's bringing two of the same karbanis, one for his anointing ceremony, and one for the one that he's going to bring every day as long as he's Kohen Gadol. Rashi Amar Shalosh, he needs three. Three karbanis. V'lei pligi, had David avodah kashu Kohen hedyet, had lo yavod avodah kashu Kohen hedyet. Guys, if he did the avodah Kohen hedyet, so he brought that inauguration carbon when it was the Kohen hedyet. Thus, when he becomes Kohen Gadol, it's only two. If he hadn't done it as a Kohen hedyet, he's being initiated for the first time period. So one, he brings the Kohen hedyet chavitin. Two, he brings the Kohen Gadol chavitin as chinuch. And the third one he brings as the beginning of the process for the rest of his life, right? For the rest of his service. That's three. Okay. Naziris Haisabash de Yadois Kematza Shebe B'Taida. Now the Naziris, that was brought, the Naziris was brought too. It was brought Rakikin and Matzais. It was not born Revuchin. Tan Rabbanon. It says by the carbon toida. Zevach im zevach toida carbon shlama. What does it say? Al zevach toida shlama. Now the shlama is extra, and we use it a few times. Elabola rabbis shalmei nazir. Laseris kabin Yushalayim. It comes to go ahead that he has to bring 10 kavim Yushalayim. Ularevius. In other words, guys, so you have two come on, right? Again, 5. Guys, remember there's 30 for the complete set, 15 and 15. So 15 and 15 means for all 3 there's 15. So if I have what? If I have 2, that's 10. So therefore that's you have. He has 2 kabbanis, it's going to be 10. So Asara Kavin Yerushalayim, it's going to be 10 Kavin Yerushalayim. Ulervi is Shemen. And it's going to be a quarter of Shemen. Right? Okay, now what does it mean a quarter? Where do you get a quarter of Shemen from? So let's see Rashi, guys. Rashi at the bottom, go up 4 lines. In the middle of the line. Ulervi Shemen. Shebetoida. The betoida haya ba chatzi like. When you bring a regular carbon toida, you brought a half a like. For oisay chatzi like, chaytze chetziav l'revucha, v'chetziav l'chalais urekikin. You would go ahead and take half of that, half for revucha, and half for the chalais and the rekikin. So of those 3, guys, you divided in half. Chalais and rekikin got 1, and revucha got the other. So there's a quarter for the revucha. Kedamin l'kamam perik shnei midas, as we're going to see later on. Alma b'shtei yodos shematzah shel toida, between the 2 parts of the matzah of the toida, the hainu chalais rekikin, lehavi behu el revius. They only had a revius. U'min v'ziris the havi b'chalais urekikin. Then therefore what? V'loy revucha havi beinami revius shemen. The hainu shtei yodos kematzah shel toida. So in other words, he's bringing they would have a half. Half would go to revucha, half would go to rekikin and chalais. He's bringing the chalais and the rekikin, so he gets that quarter. That's where we get it from. He gets that quarter. We'll see this message a little later on. But okay, that's so again, he's bringing chalais and rekikin, chalais matzos and rekikin, not revuchin, and he is bringing what with a quarter? It's 10. It's asara kavim, which would be by 6 2/3 esrainos, and he's bringing a quarter of shemen, quarter of a loiga shemen. I might think he brings also the carbon. I think he brings the carbon revucha, guys. And why do you just stop at those 2? And again, by the miluyim we didn't stop. We brought the whole kit. The non-chametz. Why over here why are you excluding revuchin? Talmud loyma, the pasuk says matzos. What does that mean? Ma talmuda. Amar papa dava shenema boy matzos. So guys, here's the pasuk. Listen to the pasuk. V'sala matzos, soiles chales, belulas bashemen, rukiki matzos meshuchim bashamen. So it doesn't say matzos by revuchin. It doesn't say matzos by revuchin. It says matzos by chalois. It says matzos by rekikin. It does not say matzos by. Therefore, what? It's excluded. The Bei Rabbi Yishmael Tana. Matzos klal, chalos rakik prat. Klalu prat, em chalal mashav prat. Chalos rakikin in midach rin aloy. Pasuk says, guys, v'sal matzos, that's a klal. Chalos 1, rakik 2, and it doesn't say revuchin. So therefore, either you're going to learn it from the fact that it doesn't say matzos, it doesn't by revuchin, or it doesn't. Or we learn that from klalu prat. The bottom line is the nasa does not bring revuchin. He only brings the chalos and the rakikin. He only brings the chalos rakikin. Okay, so so it comes out. Yeah, you have like this, guys. A toid is all 4, the miluyim was 3, and nazir is 2. And the nazir you're going to exclude the revich, you're going to revucha, and by the miluyim you're going to exclude the chametz, chalas chametz. Hashochet es toida mi beis. Hashochet es toida. Someone goes ahead and he shechs the carbon toida, lifnim. So he's shechting it where it's supposed to be shechted in the azara. It's a shlamim. It can be b'chol mokem b'azara, and the halacha is that the lechem can be eaten in all Yerushalayim. The lechem can be eaten in all Yerushalayim. That's the halacha, a kachim kalam. The lachma chutz l'chayma. The lachma and the 40 breads, they're outside the chayma. Lo kiddush halechem. We know that the action of shechting is mekadesh the lechem. If they are chutz l'chayma, then it's not going to be mekadesh the lechem. If it's chutz l'chayma, it's not going to be mekadesh the lechem. Shachtat shloik konmu paneha betanor. You shechted before it crusted over in the tanner, meaning it's still considered isa, guys. As long as it hasn't been crusted over, it's considered dough, not bread. Vafilu konmu kula, and even if all of them are crusted over, chutz me'achem, with the exception of one of them, like kiddush alechem, the lechem is not kaddish. So two dinim in the Mishnah. One, if it's not where it's supposed to be, and we'll see in a second where that is, it's not kaddish. And it's sveitendin, at which point in time is it considered lechem to be niskadesh? That's when it is crusted over. First halacha. My chutz l'chayma. When you say that it has to be within the chayma, if it's chutz, it's not. What does that mean? Rabbi Yochanan, chutz l'chayma is beis pagi. So beis pagi, according to different sources, Rashi and Bab Metzia says it's the outermost area of Yerushalayim. That's the outermost area where you could eat kachim kalim. Chutz from this area, meaning you couldn't eat it, therefore it's niskadesh. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, you're going to go after its place of eating. As long as the lachmei toida are within a place that if everything is okay, you'll be able to eat it, right? Then if you go ahead and you shecht, it's going to be kodesh. However, if it's chutz from a place where you cannot eat it, then it won't be kodesh. That's the beis pagi is that area. Reish Lakish chutz l'chaymes azara. Says Reish Lakish, it has to be in the azara proper. It has to be near just as the shechita takes place in the azara, so too it has to be what? In the azara. So guys, look back in the Mishnah. Hashochet es hatoida lufnim v'lachma chutz l'chayma. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's chutz l'chaymes of Yerushalayim, the beis pagi. According to Reish Lakish, it's chutz l'chayme azara. Which meant that's the chumrah of what of Reish Lakish. Back in the Gemara. Reish Lakish amar chutz l'chaymes azara bo'inin al besamach. It says v'hakorev v'hikriv al zevach hatoidas chalois. V'hikriv al zevach. What does al mean, guys? Next to. So from the Gezeres HaKosav, al means next to. You would have to have it next to in the azara. The shkita is in the azara. V'hikriv al zevach hatoida chalois. You would need al. You would need next to it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar chutz l'chemes beis pagi. Av chutz li'azara kodesh v'loy beinin al besamach. For the Gemara. We had the same achloikis between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Now, if you really, this is amazing. Hashochet es Pesach. If you shechting the korban Pesach, al chametz. Now it says like sishva chametz adam zevchi. You now got to guys shech the korban Pesach when what? When chametz is in possession. Therefore, you guys were always machbet to get rid of the chametz before chatzos, because the korban Pesach can't take place before being abayim. Correct. So now, if a shochet a Pesach al chametz, if the chametz is still in your possession, over b'loy saseh. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afa tamid, even the korban tamid, if you shecht, you don't even want to saseh if chametz is around. Vam Reish Lakish la'olam ein chayiv at sheyehei oy l'shochet oy l'zayrik oy le'echem mechabura imoy be'azara. Says Reish Lakish, you know when you're over on the Israel, this is chametz adam sevchi, if the chametz is in the azara with you. So that's very similar to over here. That when you shech the toida, that the lachmei toida have to be in the same jurisdiction as the sheichet. Rabbi Yochanan Amar afal pi she'eini imoy ba'azara, even if it's not in the azara, you be over. So these machlokas parallel each other. Rabbi Yochanan is saying it has to be with inside Yerushalayim, not in the azara, by in order to kiddush halachem. Rabbi Shloka says it has to be in the azara, and we're paralleling the machloikis by shchitas chom Pesach about chometz when you're over on the Issa. So Reish Lakish only when it's near you, similar to the Taida. Rabbi Yochanan says no. It has to be what it can't. It doesn't have to be near you. So you don't not over if it's near you. It can even be what farther away from you. So why tell me you're telling me the machlokes in the same venue? So it's tzricha. But he, if you tell me by a chametz, but he come Rabbi Yochanan. The Rabbi Yochanan says what? That doesn't have to be near you. Why? The kol hecha de isya be surakai. Wherever it is, it's besa. There's no din in that you need a juxtaposition. It says as long as you're shechting and you own chametz, so it's usher. So it doesn't. So Rabbi Yochanan says, you know what? I don't need it near me. If it's haste my chametz, we're going to put the word my in front of it, and my is somewhere in Yerushalayim, it's somewhere in the world. I'm going to be chayiv. That it, Aval le'inyan mekadesh lechem, but regarding mekadesh lechem, where the pasuk does say the hikriv al zevach, Eamon moidel reish lakish. Maybe he'd be moidel reish lakish by lachmei toida. That taka, in order to be kodesh, it has to be in Yazara, not just in Yerushalayim. So therefore, you have to tell me both venues, like Rabbi Yochanan, right? Rabbi Yochanan. It's a big difference, the Isra of Chametz and the din of Kiddush. The Isya, the Isya b'fnim, if it's inside the Azara, Kaddish, Abroi, if it's outside the Azara, like Kaddish. So we understand Rabbi Yochanan very well that you had to tell me in two separate venues. One's a din in Kiddush. You might say that Kamash Malon, that he doesn't say that. Kamash Malon, it's not totally in Kiddush, it's totally where you could eat it. And as long as it's in a place where you could eat it, it's going to be Kaddish. Once it gets to a place where you can't eat it, Chutz l'chaim space pagi, and you can't eat it there it's not going to be Kaddish. Let's say you tell me Nachlokas by Toida. Baha come Reish Lakish. That's what Reish Lakish says that has to be in the Zara. Since you needed Al next to it, we Mekadosh it. Al Bahach by Chometz, which is a din in Isser. I would say he's moidel Rabbi Yochanan that what, even if it's not near you, it's anywhere that you own it, you be chayiv. Kamash Malon that no, even in your chametz, it's got to be near you. So tzricha, you have to tell me both venues. So you have to tell me the venue of Lachmei Toida and the venue of Leishis Adam Sivchi. Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan, the right that's base pagi, hashoichet es hatoida lifnim ulachem of a chutz l'chaimba base pagi. If you shech the taida inside and the lechem is outside base pagi, it says openly, like kiddush alechem, you can't get more bigger Tanya Kavasi than that. It says openly what base pagi. Shachta at shaloi karmu paneha b'tanor. You shecht it before what? Before it crusts over. If you shecht it before it crust over, it's not considered lechem, it's considered isa, and therefore what? Therefore you would not be, it would be kaddish. Minani mili, the Tana Rabbanon, it won't be kaddish if it's not crusted over. How do you know this? The pasuk says, Al chalois lechem chametz, yakriv, karbonei al zevach. Now it says, Al chalois lechem chametz, what do you learn from al zevach? Malamed, sheina lechem kaddish, elim kain, komru panecha. It's mashma fellas, it has to be called lechem. And as long as it's not komru panecha, it's not called lechem. Yakriv, the pasuk says Yakriv, Karbono, al zevach, melamed, shein alechem kodesh, ela b'shchita zevach. It's only, what's the act that gives them the kedusha? It's the shchita of the, it's not baked in the oven, it doesn't get its kedusha then, it gets its, not by the klishares, it gets kedusha when it's geshachten. Zevach toidas, the pasuk says Zevach toidas, melamed shem shachat shaloi l'shmon, lo kiddush alechem. That if you shecht it shaloi l'shmon, it's not going to be kaddish. If you look at Rashi, 4 lines down where it gets wide, it is wide. 4 lines down, shem shachna shaloi l'shmon, the hachi mashma, zevach toida shlamov, yakrif chalois karbanoi, al zevach shenizbach l'shem toida. It says it must be on a zevach that was geschachten l'shem toida. When it says toida shlamov, why does it say toida shlamov? It has to be l'shem toida. So even though the carbon is what? Going to be kasha, even though it's not a chatas or a pesach, that shaloi l'shma is pasol, even though it's going to be a kaddish to a carbon, nonetheless, it's not mekadosh to lechem. It's only mekadosh to lechem when it's what? It's al shem zevach. Good. Toida. Now, Tana Rabbanan. This is geshmak, guys, as anything. Talk about inyani diyayma. Tana Rabbanan. Yotzim b'matzah. How are you in the midst of matzah? Guys, can't make it up, right? Yotzim matzah. I find it amazing. I find the parallels constantly, Too bad Rabbi Avi's taking a break. But it, look, what does it say? Yoitzin b'matzah na. If it's half baked, you would be yotza. No mevushal, right? No, you're not yotza the Korban Pesach when it's no, but the matzah when it's no, you would be, right? Uve matzah hasuya bilfis, if it's made in a pan, fried in a pan, you'd also be yotza. My matzah no, what's considered a matzah no half baked? Rav Yehuda, Shmuel, kol sheparsa, if you break it, ve'ein chutim nimshachem himenu. If it's something is if something is doughy and you break it apart, the dough will go ahead and you'll see you'll have strands. But if it's baked to the point where you break it and you don't see those strands, that is considered it's half baked, but you will be yaitza the mitzvah of matzah. Now, in the mitzvah matzah, you would be yaitza. It's amazing. It's amazing. I put on the side of my Gemara here, Shnas Tuf Shin Pei Vav, learned Yud Aleph Nisan right before Pesach. Now, Amar Rava, B'chein le'inyan lachmei toida. Now we're discussing, fellas, that it has to be crusted over, right? What about the inside? As long as the strands do not they separate from each other, then it's considered gebacken le'inyan lachmei toida. Pshita says hacham lechem ksiv, hacham lechem ksiv. So if that's lechem moini, this is lachmei toida. It says lechem, so them's the it should be the same halacha. The same halacha by matzah, the same halacha by toida. Ma'u d'teima echad amar rachmana. It says echad echad mimenu. V'shelo yitel paros. Remember your mak, but you can't take in a broken bread. It's got to be a complete one. Command the priestadamya. And if it's half baked, maybe you view it as broken already. Kimash malon, that's the chiddush by what? By that okay. That's the chiddush. Okay. Anyway, so that's the chiddush. Okay, one more time, fellas. The linyan matzah, it has to be a matzah. At which point in time is it considered matzah? Right? When you go ahead and break it apart and the strands they're not attached to each other. Who are then by lachmei toida? Says the Gemara pshita. It says lechem lechem. Says the Gemara lachmei toida. I think we're a little more machmir because it says that what the hikav echem imenu. Echad we learned yesterday that what it has to be whole and not broken. When you give the truma, when you give one of it to the kohen, it has to be whole. It can't be broken. So I might think that good le'inyan matzah, it's considered baked, but maybe le'inyan this din, it's considered broken, and therefore it's not. If it's half baked, it's considered broken, even though the strands separate. Kamashma, as long as the strands separate, it's considered completely baked, and therefore why it's considered whole and not porous, and you can give it to the kohen. Ima toida sheshachta al shmoinim chalas. The toida that is geschachten on 80 chalas. The toida that's geschachten on 80 chalas. Chizkiya, now you're only supposed to bring 40. You bought 80. Chizkiya Amar, Kitshu Arboyim Mitoich Shmoinim. And in the 80, 40 are Kaddish. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Loi Kitshu Arboyim Mitoich Shmoinim. It's not. Amar Rav Yisera, Hakol Moedim, everyone's Moeda. Heichad Amar Liktishu Arboyim Mitoich Shmoinim. That 40 in the 80 should be Kaddish. Al Yaktishu Arboyim, Elam Ken Yiktish Shmoinim. I skipped. Amar Rav Yisera, Hakol Moedim, Heichad Amar Likashu Arboyim Mitoich Shmoinim, Kitshu. Guys, you hear? Even Rabbi Yochanan will be Maida. If I'm going ahead and I verbalize, there's 80, but I only want 40 to be Kodesh, it works. We're going to get back to the Taisvins in a second. Al yakdishu arboyim, elam ken yakdishu shmainim, like hitshu. Everyone will be Maida. I'm only bringing it if all 80 are going to be Kodesh. They're not, because there's no such thing as 80, guys. Pashtas Chizki is telling you you bring 80, you only want 40 of the 80. Why'd you bring 80? It's called insurance. If something happens, I have 40 to take its place. I'm insured. So, but everyone's made that you need 40. So now, if you go ahead and you say, I'm bringing 40 in mitoch 80, everyone says it's good. If you said I'm bringing only if I'm not bringing 40, if only I can bring 80, everyone's made, there's no good. There you go. Ki pligi, when's the machlokes? Bistama. You shecht it stam. You bring 80 and you shecht it stam. Masa v'lachrayas kamechavin. Chizkiya is over the opinion that you're bringing it for echrayas, but you only magdish 40. Umasa v'l'karben gadol kamechavin, and you magdish all 80 and it doesn't work. That's Rabbi Yochanan. Abaye Omar, the Kuliya. Let's skip the till the Klisharis. Abaye Omar, the Klisharis Mekachin Shlemi Das Kamachavin. The Machlokes is where the Klisharis is Mekadesh Shlemi Das. Masa v'Chizki is of the opinion Klisharis Mekachin Shlemi Das. So you bring in 80, you bring in one Kli, and the Klisharis is Mekadesh Shlemi Das, meaning without Shalom Das, it's going to go ahead and take care of the 40, not all 80. Umasava Klisharis, Mekachin Elami Das. It's not Mekadesh at all. That's Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Papa Ahmad Kulyama Klisharis Mekachin Shalami Das. So what's Rabbi Yochanan's svara? V'hacha, let's go to the Shchita. The Sakin Kamifliki. They're arguing about whether the Sakin can be Mekadesh. In other words, the Kli itself is not a problem because it works Shalami Das. So what would be the problem in making 40 out of the 80 if it works Shalami Das? The shchita itself. In other words, the shchita is magdashit. So if the shchita is a good shchita and the kli works mishlemi das, then it should be okay, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, right? So it says, well, here's the problem. Masa of a sakim mekadeshes kakli shares, right? That is Chizkiya. Masa of a sakim even the less late toich ain't mekadeshes kli shares. So therefore, you need das. It's not. In other words, according to Chizkiya, everything works shalami das. If it works shalami das, great. If you hold that the shchita has to be das, that even though the kli doesn't, it's not going to work. Vika di Amri, Rav Papa Amar, the kuliyama klisharis emikachin elami das. Good, elami das, and therefore it's not going to work. So like Chizkiya, why does it do work? The kamifliki masa v'sakin alima mi klisharis. The sakin's better, and so therefore, even though the klisharis doesn't work, the sakin's better, and the sakin can be mekadesh. That's according to Chizkiya. The Avgav Leslie Toich Mikacha, Umasav Rabbi Yochanan holds Sakan Lo Yalim Olem Klisharis, and just like a Klisharis doesn't work, so too what? The Sakan doesn't work. So that's the Machlokes. Now Benji had brought up the Indian of Brera over here. Benji had brought up the other day the Indian of Brera. You have 80, according to the way it's worked. What are you going to say? You have to say Brera. When you take 40, you're going to say it's Huvra Dovle Mafreya, that these are the ones that are Kodesh, and therefore you're going to give Truma to what? To the Kohen. What happens if you hold Ein Brera? So if you pashas, you hold Ein Brera, you'd say that the whole thing doesn't work. Okay, now, we said everyone's Maida, if I said I'm going to go ahead and do 40 mitoich 80, it does work. Everyone's Maida, right? Even Rabbi Yochanan. Says Taisvis. Likatshu, says Taisvis, Abai mitoich shmainam, you be Mekadesh 40 mitoich 80. I never wanted to do all 80, I only want to do 40. Afagav the Rabbi Yochanan less lay Brera. Now you got a problem. If he doesn't hold the Brera, right? Bereish kol aget. Hainu hecha kishitis bara lebesayif the lav klum of it. The case of Brera, the case of their guys get is that we had the case. I have two women. They have the same name, and so which one comes out of the house first? And then at the end of the day, nothing. It does. It's not a get, right? That's when he doesn't say Brera. But aval hacha. Kodshe kol hechadisnahu. It's kodesh wherever it is. But it is kodesh. In other words, when doesn't he say brera? At the end, when if the halacha depends upon brera, then he says le'ein brera. Meaning, it's manav shacha get or not a get. Over here, it's zicha kodesh. The question is where it is. Benji, you hear the difference. The case of Gittin is I'm not a few cases over there. I have two wives. I have two wives that have the same name, write it, and whoever I give it to, that's the one. So Brera is to create what? To create the get. Then we don't say Brera. Over here, as you magdish 40 mitoich 80, you don't need Brera to create the Kedusha. The Kedusha is there. By get, it wasn't a get. Over here, there's Kedusha. It's there. Where is it? I don't know. Then he would say Breira. It's a difference, nice difference between the two. Okay? So now, however, so I say Breira. So what about Ukeshebola Hafish Dalit Chalis al Truma, Sarich Lahafish Yud Aleph Chalis, he called Minu Min. You'd have to go ahead and separate 11. The Ilav Hachi, Kivin the Ein Breira, Dilma de Chulin Kashakal. You'd have to give, in other words, I have over here, if you're going to hold Ein Breira, right? I'm going to say over here that I'm going to bring 40. I'm going to give 11 to the, if I give 10, I separate 10. By separating 10, maybe it's all chulin. If I separate 11, that's guaranteeing one of them is kodesh. I'm guaranteeing one of them is kodesh. So Taisus points out over here, like Rabbi Yochanan, if you can say Ein Breira over here, you're going to have to separate a total of 11, not 10, 10, 10, and give to the kohen. You have to separate 11 to ensure that there's going to be what? To ensure that there's going to be kodesh here, not just chulin. Okay, Bez Hashem, guys. Okay, we still see it, or did I stop it? You don't see it?
It stopped. Yeah. Okay, we got it.
Kasav Rama Perikil Mihilchas Chanukah Allah Chavav. Loi Halal Shel Chanukah Bovad Hu Shem Midivei Seifrim. Not only Chanukah alone is Midivei Seifrim, the Kriyas Halal, El Kriyas Halal Lo'olam Midivei Seifrim. Anytime you read Halal, it's only Midrabanan. B'chol Hayomim Shegomim B'Memes Halal. The days you complete Halal. We'll see what that means in a second. Ad Kan. Uba'asag Sham. The Ravid says, Omar Avram, V'yesh Me Masei Midivei Kabbalah. There's days of Halal that are Midivei Kabbalah. Hashir Yi Yelachem Kol Tiskadesh Chag. A pasuk says the shir should be for you a kol tischag. Says the Rambam, every single days, the days that you goymer es halal is midivrei seifrim. On that, the Ravid Masik says not every day is divrei seifrim. Some of them are divrei Kabbalah. Guys, divrei Kabbalah is a higher level. For example, the Megillah. Megillah was al yedei Esther and Mordechai. So it's a higher level than what then? It's a higher level than midivrei seifrim. So that's the asag of the Ravid. Okay. V'hinei b'psachim, omen neviim shebeneihem, tiklam Yisrael, sheyu oimnim oisay al kol perek uperek, you say halal on each perek and perek are called tzara v'tzara. So there's two times, perek and perek, tzara v'tzara. Shlei tavi lem Yisrael, ukshenigolim oimnim oisay al gulasam, and when we're going, we say that. Pirish Rashi, the al kol perek uperek is mayadim, that's set in the Torah, al kol tzara v'tzara, hainu nes Chanukah. So Rashi says, it both speaking about things that have a set zman, the reg regolim and Chanukah. Ulam behilchas gedoylus the bahag kosav. What's pshat al kol perek and perek al kol tzara v'tzara? The al kol tzara loikoi al yom hakavuyim klal. Al tzara is not going on a set time. Rak the heicha she'ir lehem tzara when a tzara happens to Klal Yisrael. V'nigalu oz yichilin kol Yisrael yachad loy mahalel. If all Yisrael are together in this gula, in this redemption, then you could say halal. So perek uperek, that's a halal based upon a set time. Tzara v'tzara is based upon special times when Bnei Yisrael are nigalu from tzara. That's the bahag. That's the bahag. V'dafka kol Yisrael yachad. Dafka kol Yisrael. Where did I skip? Ulam. Yeah, no, good. V'dafka when everyone's together. V'dafka kol Yisrael yachad. Al tziburi mikri gam ken yachid. The tzibur is called the yachid. V'heim beis dinim says the bahag. There's two dinim. The al kol perek uperek hainu yudches yomim hakavuyim, the 18 days that are kavua to say halal. The al kol tzara v'tzara hu din acher. It's a totally different din. The hainu the chaylun loy mahalel b'chol zman shenigola mitzara. You could say it any time you are what you were saved from mitzara. Ubezeh iket hanoi shall kol Yisrael yachad dafka with the condition that we're all together. The chen kosav atoisis b'brachas daf yudalid diva maskel yomim. Sheyachid goyme behem es halal. Bezel l'shayne Tosfos. V'lav dafka yachid elafilu tzibur could also. In other words, not even an individual could say halal, but tzibur also. Kiven shein kol Yisrael biyachad. Since all Yisrael are not together at the time, k'moshayu b'shchitas psachim b'yedalid b'nisin. V'lav now he throws in that al Sarah v'tzara, and Tosfos falls in just like the shchita of the Pesach on Yudal and Nisan. V'lav dafka goymer ad kan. Okay, I'll speak at the kasha he's going to ask. Yes, gavalga kasha. So you're telling me this at Sarah. You're telling me this at Sarah, and from that Sarah, Bnei Yisrael can come together and say Hallel. So there's a Hallel of Yomim Kavuim, the times that called Perik Uperek, and then there's Tzar V'Tzara. Tzar V'Tzara, Bnei Yisrael comes together in Tzara, and Tosfos shells sich to what? To the Shchitas Pesach. Shchitas Pesach is the following, fellas. In Daf Samich Dalet, in Psachim, describes how the Korban Pesach was bought. They would be millions, it could be 1 million korbanos in a very short period of time. And it's describing the fanfare of the Kohen, golden and silver kalim going like this, taking empties. And then we had it recently. Rabbi Yehuda would go ahead from the floor, he would take it and throw it in case one, right? And it says there were 3 groups. They would close the doors and they would say Hallow. And if they didn't finish, they go ahead. If they finished it, they would repeat it again. But they wouldn't repeat the whole thing. They would stop. Rabbi Yehuda says one day they didn't even get to a hafti. No, it's never happened. So you see, it's a halal. They weren't goymer as a halal. They didn't complete it. Okay. So that's what Tosfos is discussing over here. That when Tosfos brings it in, that's Gemara. This is what he means. V'hinei, ma she'eviu b'shchitas psachim b'yudal nisan tzarich laimar desfirle kashitas Rashi she'Yisrael oimim halel v'lo yalavim kashitas Tosfos sham v'Rambam. Tosfos says that shira that was being said was by the Levium, and the Rambam says like Levium, but Rashi says no, the Yisraelim. And Tosfos holds like that. He's not bringing any proof to anything. If Yisrael are not saying it, then you can't sushtel the bringing on days of Halal to the days of Tzara. Avalakati tzarchiyen the Hasam halahu din the chayva loyma halal al shkitas haPesach, right? Uma shayches ze lahanach dina Yisrael yachad yichadim loyma halal b'nigolim minat Tzara. You're making a comparison, fellas. What's your comparison? You're saying just like there's a halal when Bnei Yisrael are complete, there's a halal when Bnei Yisrael are what? Are saved from the Tzara. That's the same halal as what? As when Bnei Yisrael are shechting the Pesach. There's a choiv when Bnei Yisrael are shechting the Pesach with a certain simcha saying the halal. There's certain. How can you compare the two? What's the comparison? As I frag the Briskerov. This is a shtickle from Rav Chaim. Okay. V'hinei Haran beperek Avei Pesachim hevi b'shem Rav Hai Goin v'zel Shono. Aval Rav Hai Goin kosav b'tshuvas she'ein mevorkin al halal shel b'leilei Pesachim. This guy's going to answer the kasha that now that you're going to hear it, you're going to ask a question. You should have had this kasha your whole life. Why don't you make a bracha on the halal that you say by the seder? Good kasha. Why don't you make a bracha on the halal that you say by the seder? You don't make a bracha on that. Shein v'archan halal shebelel ligmor es halal. Shein anu koyin ma'aslei b'toyres koyin. We don't read it in the Torah of Kriya, el b'toyres shira. We say it in the Torah of Shira. Ulefikach in ba'adam levarech. If a person wants to make a bracha, mishaskan or so. Tell him be quiet. Over Mordechai Hevi Zeh B'Shini Loshin, the Mordechai brings the same thing as Rav Hai with a little different expression. Ktsas, V'zel Shoina of the Mordechai. Kriyas HaHalel, Shebelel Pesachim, Kosvu HaGoinim, Shein Levarach Alav Ligmar, you don't make a bracha to finish it, Lefi Shemafsikin Boy, because we're going to make a hefsek. Sudasai, we have a hefsek in the Suda. Guys, we say Halel, big part of it, we have the Suda, and then we complete it. Therefore, you're not going to make a bracha. Ve'eno ela koire ba'alma, the lashon koira. V'chein pirish of Haigoin, Rav Tzemach, she'eno ela koire ba'alma ad kan. Ubir Dvreim. These are the explanation of Rav Hai and of the Mordechai. This is the Rav Chaim Brisker's explanation. Ubir Dvreim, Nira. The be'emes, beis dine halal hein. There's 2 dinim of halal. The halal in the taken li yudches yamim, hakavoyim, that halal that's set for the 18 days of Yontif, different Yom Tovim. Hu adin kriyas halal, v'din halal, the tiknu sheyecholim loymar, kishenigulu mitzara, ein din halal shel kriyas halal, ki im din shel halal shel shira. There's 2 dinim. There's one halal that's a halal called Kriya. That's the halal we say on those 18 days. And then there's a second halal. The halal that what? Was when Bnei Yisrael were nigalu, we say that halal. And that's a halal of Shira. V'hainu demaisi toisris, guys, mishritas Pesach. That's why Toisris is bringing the halal from Shchitas Pesach to the halal days we were nigalu. Did Sorach Kol Yisrael Yachad. After Hasam Halal Hu Dechayva, even though there the halal was of Chiyav, because they're bringing the Korban Pesach, El Demaisi, the Bidin Halal Shel Shira, Tzarech Dafka Kol Yisrael Yachad. Just like over there we're all together, it's bringing in the Kuda that we all have to be together. So there's a second Shira. It's called the Shira that when you're Nigalu. And then he brings in the idea of that we have to be together. He brings that in by bringing in the Korban Pesach. But the Shechita of the Korban Pesach also was of Shira. And it also was Bnei Yisrael together. So that's one nafkamina. When can you say the shir of halal? When biyachad. And the raya is from Korban Pesach. V'yoy nafkamina, the bahalal shall kriya halal tzarech kol halal. When it's a halal of kriya, the 18 days, you have to say the whole thing. V'leishayach mixas halal. You can't say it partially. Right? That we say on Pesach, we don't say the whole thing, is what? Ma'aseh yodav tova beyon v'ata mishira. They were, why are they being saved, right? Anyway, so but really it should be a halal of a completion. Masha'enkin halal shel shira. You don't have to say the whole thing. Shabbos shayach af mikzas halal kimavur b'mishnah pesachim, like the Mishnah Pesachim guys. Mimeyem shel kait shlishis, in the days of the third group that made it into the Azara to Shecht, lehigia lahafti kiyishmas Hashem. So you see, they didn't complete it. So two dinim. One, you have to be together. And two, you don't have to complete it. Three, you don't have to make a bracha on it. This is the lashon of Gemara in brachas. Yomim shehayachid goyme b'hem halal. The day the yachid is goyme halal, what's that? That's a halal of kriya. V'hainu denakat elu habeis nafkaminis. Right? The yomim hakavuyim ain't sarach kol Yisrael. V'gam ikadina de goymer. V'lo shayach mixas halal. So days you're going mesa halal, days you're not going mesa halal. The days you're going mesa halal is a lashon of kriya. The days you're not going mesa halal is a lashon of shira. You don't have to make a bracha. If you're saying oima b'tayris kaira, you're not saying it is kriya. What's the loima? Saying b'tayris kriyas halal, kiyim b'tayris oima shira. There's no bracha on that. So gam came mashahevi b'mordechai. The kimin shemafsikim be'emsa, since you're going to eat in the middle, harisheino ela halal shel shira. By doing that, you show it's in a halal of shira, v'lo shel kriyas halal, and not a halal of kriya. Let's go back to the Rambam, guys. What was the kash in the Rambam? The Rambam said they're all divrei seifrim. What was the hasaga of the Ravid? The hasaga of the Ravid was what? The hasaga of the Ravid was that it's divrei Kabbalah. Now, guys, look at the lashon of the Rambam. Let's go back to the lashon of the Rambam. Kasav Rambam Hilchos Chanukah v'lo yihalo shel Chanukah b'vad hu midivei seifrim ela kriyas ahalal la'olam midivei seifrim b'chol yahayamim she goyim behem es ahalal. What halal is the Rambam discussing? The Rambam of kriya and the Rambam that you complete. The Rambam that you the halal that you complete, of course, is kriya, and that's the seifrim. When the Rabbi is masig and said there's some that's divrei Kabbalah, Rambam wasn't discussing that. That divrei Kabbalah, fellas, that divrei Kabbalah is the halal of Shira. That's the day you're not goyim es halal. So the Rambam is only discussing one of them. The day you're goyim es halal. The day you're goyim es halal ain't nochinami. It's all divrei seifrim. He wasn't discussing that. The Rabbi's masig. The Rabbi didn't realize the Rambam wasn't discussing that halal. The halal that is the Kabbalah, that's the halal of Shira. That's the halal we say like by the Seder. That's the halal that we said by when we did the Korban Pesach. That's the halal. That's the halal. The din halal shall kriyas halal hu la'olam midivei seifrim. Aval halal shall shira hu midivei Kabbalah. V'hainu kroa, that's the pasuk there. Shir yelachem called iskadish chag. The koyal arvei pesachim. The hu adin halal shel shira. The halal of Erev Pesach and the halal of shira. Zeh midivei Kabbalah. Hagriz in the stensluch. V'hain. Okay, that's the guys. It's a different halal. It's a different halal. You have a whole different musik and halal, right? It's a whole different idea what halal is. How geschmack is that? Morty? Kedai to come to hear that. The brisket Torah is unbelievable. Such geschmack, geschmack, geschmack Torah, right? I love that. Okay, thanks for listening.